We did it! Hey, everybody. We were having technical difficulties, but we are all good now. Welcome to MyndConnection, connecting like minds in conversation. I am Nisha at Mindtree, and I'm super excited for you all to meet my good friend, Dr. Jyothi Rao. Thanks, Joe, for doing this with me. So we have an interesting friendship story. We actually were friends back in high school in New Jersey. Don't worry, I'm not going to mention any high school stories, Joe.
Thank goodness.
So this was in the late 80s. You all can do the math, figure it out. But yeah, this was in the late 80s, and then we lost touch when we went away to college, and then we both wound up in the same area, settling in the same area in Maryland, and we didn't reconnect until, I don't know, like maybe 25 years? How long do you think it was? I think it was around 25 years, right? Yeah. And it's so interesting because we talk about this, right? How we were both at a specific place in our life when we reconnected. And it was sort of the common interest around energy medicine and all that brought us together. And since then, we've been amazing friends. We love to have deep conversations. And we've been talking about this, how much fun it would be to have one of those conversations, but do it live. So that's how this came about.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, it reminds me of, like, they say that friends come into our lives, you know, either for a season or a reason. And I feel like for both, if we basically had both season and reason. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah, no, and also, Nisha, you've been on my podcast as well, talking about your journey, which is right in line with my philosophy of how, you know, gut, brain, mind, body, everything's entwined with health and maintenance of health, and how, you know, resilience is built upon sometimes having those stressors happen, but then how we rebound from it is actually growth. So we had a nice conversation about your journey as well.
Oh, thanks. It was so much fun, and I'm excited to have more fun today. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about our topic because it's something which, you know, personally has impacted me in my life, and really I basically attribute it to saving my life. You know, back 5 or 6 years ago, actually a little bit more than that, when I was struggling with ulcerative colitis, and it had gotten so bad. And it was really integrative medicine that I attribute, you know, to saving my life. And so I'm even more, you know, excited about talking about the whole gut and mind connection, because we hear all the time about the mind-body connection, right? But I feel like the mind-gut connection, I don't know, you can elaborate on this, but it's sort of fairly new concept, relatively.
Yeah, I think it's been brought to light a lot since the research on the microbiomes, which has exploded over the last 5 years. Probably since the genetics of the microbiome was looked at. And, you know, it turns out that, you know, 25 years in medicine, I am, you know, so thankful that we have found this connection, because in my practice, I find that if I don't deal with someone's gut, it is very difficult to move them to the next level, or, you know, just dealing with the parasympathetic system, which is our rest and digest system. So much of us are working on an sympathetic overdrive, which means we are on fight or flight all the time. And that imbalance with being in sympathetic all the time drives down our parasympathetic, which is our rest and digest. And part of that concept of rest and digest is the digestion, but also the rest. That's where that mind-body connection happens. But the vagus nerve and working on the concepts of the gut just blew me away. And fundamentally, it comes down to 3 basic principles. And one is that 80% of our immune system, which is the cells that create all the barriers to the bad guys coming in, but also creating the inflammation cells to fight the bad guys. So inflammation isn't just bad. It can be good when we're seeing something. I mean, especially with COVID, we need our immune system to be active and fight the bad guy. And part of that fight will install and kind of incur like some sort of an inflammation response, but we need that to be tempered and controlled, right? So our gut is where a lot of those cells reside. And so we need to take care of that gut. But the other big thing is that the microbiome, which gives us, 3 million genes, and that does thousands of hundreds of thousands of things for us, including just make our vitamins and our hormones and our neurotransmitters that keep us thinking, control our metabolism, help us digest our foods. It just goes on and on. We need to nourish that microbiome. And then the third thing with the gut brain simplified is that these neurotransmitters like serotonin, 80% of them, which is kind of our happy juice, is generated in the gut. So
Wow.
for all of those reasons, you could see why if we're on sympathetic overdrive, which is fight or flight, and we shut down our parasympathetic, which is rest and digest, all of those systems, that's why it kind of is like, it's not just your gut that goes, you don't just get heartburn, you start to get joint pain and rashes and your hair starts falling out and you can't sleep. And it's like all of these things start happening. And we have to go back and fundamentally work on that rest and digest concept. So functionally, we have to start with the gut. Whether it's the food we're eating, whether it's we have a leaky gut, we have a barrier dysfunction, we have overgrowth of bugs, we have yeast overgrowth, parasites, whatever it is, toxins. If we can't find the root cause, to me, everything else is a Band-Aid, right? So going after the root cause, especially for something like ulcerative colitis, it didn't just start one day. It has broken down over maybe 10 years, 5 years of constant, something is kind of changing the gut microbiome. It starts with bug changes, and then it starts with food sensitivities, and then it ends up with ulcers, so and then leakiness. So there's so much of that pre-cause that we have to look at, but also the concept should be hope, because you can do a lot with illness when you look at these concepts, and also to try to put the power back into you, because that's what I want people to know, is how powerful they really are in their destiny for their health.
And it's really interesting that you mentioned, it's not just about putting a Band-Aid on it, right? And I think I want to like talk to the people who maybe aren't familiar with integrative medicine, or who may be hesitating to try it, because and we'll dive deeper into your book, but I love how you talk about that, how with traditional medicine, it's about replace the hip. It's about, do the surgery, rather than looking at, like you mentioned, the root cause. So why don't you, for anybody like that may not be familiar with integrative medicine, why don't you explain to them what that means? And also share your own personal story, how you got into it.
So integrative medicine to me, so I'm an internist, trained, board certified internal medicine. So it's not about not using meds, not using surgery, not using referrals. I mean, everything is important. Integration really means understanding that the power of our lifestyle matters, how we sleep, how we think. Even negative thoughts impact our physique, our body, our changes in our gut. So, the power of the mind, the power of the fact that we can, do things like not sit all the time. So movement, the mind-body connection, sleep, the role of sleep is so critical in our healing process, right? So aside from just the gut that we talked about, how powerful it is in order to grow those good bugs. And I'd love to be able to talk about small things people can do to foster that. But in general, it's about kind of that integration of everything matters. It's not just your skin rash. Your skin rash is coming from GI disturbance. It's coming from maybe the negative thoughts, which the gut-brain connection can just keep fueling it, right? So the more the negative thoughts we have, we can alter our gut microbiome, which then sends signals to our brain that we're running from a tiger, and it increases our cortisol, and it starts that spiral downward. And so the next thing you know is like drugs. That's all I have as an option, but that's not all you have as an option. There's so many things. There's things like energy medicine, there's acupuncture, there's meditation, there's things like supplements that we can get into, but it's based on nutrient deficiency. So getting tested for hormone imbalance, nutrient imbalance, stool imbalance. So it's just like any other testing that you're doing. It's fundamentally not just someone looking at you. And as an acupuncturist, we check people's pulses, we check their tongue, and you can access people's information that way. But we also use data from stool analysis and nutrient analysis and hormones to see what's off balance. And then we go after those things to correct the imbalance, which it doesn't matter if you have diabetes or hypertension or inflammatory bowel disease or autoimmune disease. It's all the same principle. It's going after what are the genes saying? What is your environmental toxins? And environmental toxins could be, the soil, it could be the mercury in your teeth, it could be the fact that you have a bad boss you're under stress 8 hours a day, that could be your toxin. So we have to find out what is it that's toxic to you and kind of help people remove it in a personalized way, because just one diagnosis of, say, hypertension is not the same etiology for everyone. Reflux, acid reflux is not the same reason for everyone. So we have to look at, is yours H. pylori? Is yours because you have a bad, you have a yeast overgrowth? Is yours because you have too many eosinophils or mast cell dysfunction? So there's so many different reasons why people have similar symptoms, but it doesn't always translate to the same therapies. And that's why one of the reasons why things don't work. People take drugs, they stop taking it because it didn't work for me, especially in the realm of psychiatry, right? How many meds do people go through before and there's no testing. So part of it is a guess, but we have 11 major neurotransmitters, and a lot of them stem from the gut-brain connection. So again, you have to come back to the gut to heal. We have to get people sleeping. We got to get people moving. Sitting in a chair is not great for a lot of medical issues, right? So we got to get people up and about. But how is someone going to do that if they're tired and they are sleep deprived and they're exhausted and they're depressed? If you tell someone go walk walk for a block or two, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. There's no way I have the energy to do anything. So that's why mentally we start somewhere.
Yeah, and what I love about your practice is it's not just the therapies. You're actually doing, like you mentioned, you may be doing stool tests, you're doing the blood work. You're also using the actual testing to verify and to help the patient along. But when a patient, typically when they come to you, in my situation, it was like I felt like I had no other choice. I felt like I had exhausted all the Western med options and then found out about integrative medicine. So in my mind, I had reached a very low point. What are you seeing in terms of the patients that are coming to you? What types of issues are they coming to you with? And also, like, where do you start with them? So let's kind of walk them through the process.
Initially, one thing I forgot to mention about integrative medicine is also the quality of the relationship between the provider and the patient. Okay, so we are guides. We are consultants. We are not here's a pill, I'll see you back in 3 months. I have 10 minutes with you to address your symptoms. You have hypertension, diabetes, and you have GERD. Here are 3 meds and see you in 3 months. It's not that kind of relationship. It's a lot of it is an hour to an hour and a half intake in the beginning, going over childhood issues. How did you, were you born vaginally? Were you born, were you nursed? Did you get a lot of antibiotics? Was there psychological trauma as a child? Is looking at a lot of history in order to see where people broke down. So fundamentally, we have more time. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. People come into my office with charts because they've been frustrated. They go through many doctors before they get to us. Right. The philosophy is different, obviously. And I think that it's just about trying to not look at the same blood tests and the same breakdowns. It's about trying to figure out what it hasn't been looked at and what is the missing link. And so it takes a while. I'm not going to say it's easy, especially if people have been unwell for years, or, sometimes people have been unwell for 10 years. And they're seeing stuff like that now after COVID, right? COVID, people are getting this weird post-infectious, like a malaise or a chronic. That has been out there for a long time from other viruses and other issues, even surgeries. Even people can, relate back to say, I was well until January 6th when I had this procedure, and then my life started going downhill. And it's the immune system dysfunction, right? So fundamentally, most of what I do is speak to the immune system, try to target what is upsetting that immune system. Is it a virus? Is it a mold? What is it that's making this immune system go crazy? And so that is a very personal journey for most people, right? So we have to try to look at those things. So fundamentally, we need time. And so we allocate a little bit. In my old practice, I'd have, 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes for a new patient, 15 minutes, 10 minutes for a follow-up. But by the time someone gets checked in, I literally have 7 minutes a person. So there's not that much you can do in that 7 minutes. So for our practice, the typical intake is about 60 to 90 minutes, depending on how complicated people are. And then we go through their results and we go through a plan. Almost everyone will get a diet change. Absolutely. Whether it's, whether it's elimination diet, whether it's a antihistamine diet, or it's a SIBO diet or a FODMAP diet. But diet is going to be critical, because we're going to take a good guess on what the imbalance is when I first see you, but then we're going to put you on a food plan. So one thing is, you're not leaving there with supplements only, because even if I do prescriptions, I do it all, but I don't think that supplements are better than prescriptions. I think supplements are also bridges to getting people to remove the offending agent, re-inoculate, like colonize the body properly, but also fix the underlying root cause. And that takes a little bit of a journey and time depending on people. So we use supplements as a bridge. People don't have enough nutrients, if people are hormonally imbalanced, if people need help with their insulin, absolutely, we use meds and supplements, but that's not the end game. The end game is really about trying to get to that place where lifestyle can take over. And that, unfortunately, means a lot of work on the patient. Like, I'm going to ask you to meditate. I'm going to ask you to change your sleep cycle. I'm going to ask you not to check your phone at night, and so all of those things, it's not to be overwhelming, but it's to teach you that it all matters. And so,
right. And these are harmless, right? If you try it, there are no side effects.
Right. And all of this is a journey. It's not a quick fix by any means. I will tell you that eliminating things like gluten and dairy make absolutely crazy level changes in people when they are sensitive to those things. So I've seen people remarkably turn around in 4 weeks just by eliminating bad foods. So I always start with that. So whatever food plan we have you on, we're going to talk about, not using processed food and eating whole foods as much as possible, the best version of that food, whether if it is a meat, then we want it to be organic, or, I'm a plant-based physician. I love for people to do more plants and to try to move in that line, but it's not where we always have to start. We can, go with people to where their starting point, but nobody needs as much sugar as we're taking, and as much salt, as much, processed foods or preservatives. So
but Joe, don't tell me to give up sugar and chocolate.
No, I
can't do that.
Not you, Shakthi. You are the queen. And I also need your chocolate and your sweets that you make. You're incredible. I think that there's a role for everything, is my point, right? So if we can start somewhere for people to, and then they see the change, the fatigue goes away, the brain fog goes away, then you have more motivation to say, okay, I'm going to keep going on this journey, where it's a lot more work for me than taking a pill, but I'm going to get so much more out of it.
Yeah, even if it's just like looking at food and eliminating processed food, because I remember, like, when I was, my whole life practically, my mom was always like, eat fresh food. And I was like, yeah, whatever. But when I was dealing with the UC, it made a huge difference that I was eating freshly made food. And I think, even with the pandemic, we see everybody cooking a lot more and baking their own breads and stuff like that. So even if you need to start with just eliminating the processed food, that's a good place to start, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, the fact that people are cooking more. I mean, I've had a lot of patients do really well in COVID. They have different stressors, right? They're managing kids and job and doing things virtually, but they're also like, I have more time to cook, and I have more time to work out, and I'm starting a yoga practice. So it has been kind of a silver lining to give people the opportunity to start maybe a habit that they didn't do before. I mean, I know personally, I've been cooking more than I've ever cooked before, just because you didn't have a choice in the beginning. You had to, there was nothing open. There was no takeout. There was, the grocery stores were empty shelves.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on? So part of it was just this craziness, but now we feel better. You just like, wow, I don't gain my 10 pounds in winter like I used to, because, I'm not eating out all the time, or, something like that. So I find I'm always learning something. But the integrative medicine aspect, it really shouldn't be scary to people or disconcerting. It's really medicine. And, in our book, we try to talk about all of these lifestyle changes. Honestly, our book is mostly about lifestyle, but it's evidence-based. So we're trying to quote studies and really talk about the guidelines that people have at different levels, like the American Heart Association. I mean, there's all these different groups have everything in there, but it's like, merged into meds first. So we can do meds for heart disease, but in conjunction, we can also do all these other things, which is going to help people gain so much a better livelihood, a wellness factor. We're not interested in just lowering your lipids. We want to make you feel better, feel younger, get to your optimal weight, feeling restored. And people are living longer, even though the last year has had a setback because of COVID. And I think, but we're going to eventually, the longevity studies show that people very soon might be living till 90s to 100 plus. And this can happen within the next 20 years because of the crazy amount of research coming through on how we can do things. Like we have the data from the Blue Zone data, which looked at the communities that live the longest. And there's 11 major factors, but a lot of it comes down to things like their food and their purpose, their sense of purpose.
So let's take it back and explain to people what the Blue Zone is.
Okay. So
the community
was looked at by National Geographic, I think in the 1980s or early 90s. And Dan Buettner, I think is his name. And he was he was a journalist, and he went around to different parts of the world and saw that there were major areas where people just lived well and longevity, but not longevity where they were in a nursing home or in a wheelchair. They were active members of society, and they were living past 100 and living like well over 80. And he kind of categorized them. And I have to remember, it was Costa Rica, it was an area in Japan, it was Sardinia, it was in Italy, it was in Loma Linda, California, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the last area, but he took all those areas and looked at the characteristics of what were they doing, and he overlapped them. So there's all these like diagrams, and in the crux of it was the food. And another part of it was that they were mostly plants. They weren't all vegetarians or vegans, but they were mostly plant-based. And when they did have meats, it was wholesome versions of the meat. Like it was versions without antibiotics or hormones, and it was fresh, and it was, infrequent. So it wasn't the mainstay of their diet.
Right.
Beans and vegetables and fiber-rich foods and grains were at the crux of a lot of it. And then the other aspects were movement. People were engaged in activity. They were engaged in a purpose. So they woke up every day thinking that they had, to water their plants, take care of their grandkids, to meet their friends. There was some sense of purpose. So, since that book has come out, the ex-Surgeon General had written a book on how loneliness is so bad for
us. I read that. Yeah.
Community and purpose is so important. That's one of the reasons I think mental health is really deteriorated with COVID, because we don't have that personal connection. Sure, I can see you on Zoom, or I can see you on a camera, but it's not, there's an element of that personal connection that's so important for our health.
Right.
So there's layers of what's really important. And so they categorize this in the Blue Zone book, and it's really well done, and I would encourage people to do it. He's since then written books about happiness related to blue zones and different cultures that tend to be happier than everyone else. And so there's a lot of nice information coming from there. But at the end of the day, it comes back down to lifestyle and the choices that we make, because genetics we're born with, male or female we're born with. We can't really change those things, and that predetermines our destiny in some sense. But our control over how our path is to our future health is really a lot through lifestyle. I mean, not 100%, but I think that there's a lot we can do to change our course and grow things like telomeres, which are the end caps on our genes, which help us stay youthful and young, and also prevent us from getting chronic illness. Age is one of the biggest factors in chronic illness, in getting cancers, in getting chronic illness. It's also that our immune system starts to tank as we age. What if we slowed down that process naturally? Well, absolutely, it would help us, deter those things that would come. But that is through, say, yoga, deep breathing. Our Mediterranean diets have been shown to grow our telomeres. So all of these lifestyle choices. And
mindfulness. I love it. I loved it when the mindfulness meditation study came out, where they actually found that it was increasing the telomere length. And I was like, yes, we can reverse aging. I mean, not technically, but
I mean, none of us want to go back to being, puberty again. I am not.
We don't want to go back to high school.
I don't want to go back to high school. I don't even want to go back in my 30s. I just want to be able to go forward and basically it's the train of aging that's going forward, and we're just slowing it down. We're not reversing that train. We're just slowing it down so that we can have independence. So what do we want when we age? We want cognitive function. We want to be able to see. We want our senses. We want to be able to have balance. and structurally strong, our bones strong, our muscles strong, so that we can actually be able to live independently, right? Like that's what most people want when they think about retirement and aging. But those are the things that go. Those are the
Right.
elements of my memory loss and Alzheimer's is crazy in terms of how high the numbers are right now. And something like that doesn't just affect the person, it affects the entire family.
Right,
So
right. So let's dive into the book. And one of the things which I loved about your book was how you actually give examples of case studies. Like it becomes very real. So there's not only like so much information packed into it, but also there's so many great tools and tips. And like I said earlier, what I found fascinating was it's not only about the food, it's all of these other things that we can do. So let's break it down step by step for people. Like what are the other, let's actually dive into the non-food factors that can affect inflammation. And just so the audience knows also, we're not talking about inflammation like when you sprain your ankle and there's inflammation. We're talking about actual internal inflammation. And Joe, why don't you start by giving some examples of how people start to notice that, and what types of, whether it's diseases or symptoms, how do we know that our body is actually inflamed?
Yes. So we have, this, so I'll start with that sympathetic parasympathetic issue in terms of like when our, somebody, Divya said something funny. The fact that we are always, one of the things of that mind-body connection and the parasympathetic sympathetic is when the sympathetic and when we have our parasympathetic sympathetic out of balance, that imbalance can create then that can create inflammation. Inflammation, to be honest, is not a negative thing. It's like stress. It's the level of chronicity of it. We absolutely need inflammation. If we were supposed to touch fire and our bodies didn't tell us, turned red and hot, that's inflammation, but we need that to tell us to move it away. And we need things to heal. If we cut ourselves, we need inflammation. It inflames, and we need those cells to actually heal us. We need the inflammation to fight off the viruses. So inflammation by itself isn't bad. It's the chronicity of it, just like chronicity of stress. So the chronic inflammation component comes in when our sympathetic system is always on. So adrenaline is always on, heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, and cortisol, our hormone cortisol from our adrenal glands, stays activated. And that sounds like it's a good thing in the beginning because it's an anti-inflammatory. It helps get sugar to our brain. It helps get the fat mobilized so that if we were going through a famine, or if we were being chased by hunters, or we were being chased by tigers, it's a good thing. It helps us store food. It helps us mobilize. It helps us move, right? But if it's every email, I'm stuck in traffic, I'm sitting there, I've got 20 emails, I'm so tired, I got these kids screaming at me. It's constant stress response going on. Your adrenaline is going to be up all the time. Your cortisol is going to be up all the time. Your rest and digest system, with your immune system, with your serotonin, with your gut brain, it's all going to be in the toilet. That's what starts to break us down. And it's like that light that shows up on your car when you need, it's like that light that's flashing, and your body tells you, hey, your hair's falling out. Hey, you have this rash, you have joint pain, you're tired. Why are you tired? Why are you tired at 2:00 in the afternoon? Why are you gaining weight in your midsection? These are all symptoms of things that tell you that your system is in imbalance. There's something off. You're not doing something, or you're doing something excessive, or there's a root cause brewing, and you have to, instead of that, what do? We like tape over that signal in the car, and just keep driving. Well, I do that sometimes. I'm really But I think that the issue is that we have to listen to our bodies when we're tired. I mean, it took me forever and a day to figure out that the fatigue that I was feeling isn't just because you think, okay, you're juggling this crazy life, you're moving around all the time, you have these kids, you have a job, you have and you just like, what am I supposed to feel like? Well, you don't even know what you're supposed to feel like until you've removed the stuff and for me, it was dairy. It was the foods I was eating. And once I removed that, I realized how much more energy I had. And this was like the start of my path. But the problem is that there's no big sign that comes up that tells us your gluten is making you bad. It's bad for you. It's not always gluten for everyone. I'm using it as an example.
Yeah.
But there are signs all the time. We just have to pay attention. So like if your heart rate goes up, when people wear those watches, sometimes they'll eat food and their heart rate goes up 5 points. That's a sign that food might be sensitive to you. That's a sign that it might be breaking you down. You know, when you know, you don't always get rashes or your tongue doesn't swell up from food sensitivities, but you will get symptoms like brain fog. I feel so tired. I don't know why I'm so tired. Oh, because I had lunch. Well, sometimes it's what you ate for lunch, not the fact that it was lunch, right? So
Yeah,
we have
yeah,
to,
I've noticed that there are certain foods that'll make me more tired, and it's like, why is this happening? This should be giving me more energy.
right. So it's the start of the symptoms. And if you ignore them and you ignore them and you ignore them. So if the sympathetic drive is up, your heart rate goes up and your blood pressure goes up and it keeps staying up, that turns into hypertension. If your sugar is mobilized because your cortisol is always up, that turns into diabetes. And if your
Mm,
cortisol is always up and your midsection starts getting bigger, that can turn into something called metabolic syndrome, hyperlipidemia. Like all these diagnoses, you don't just wake up one day with it. It's an ongoing thing, and your body has been throwing these lights at you all this time, and you're just kind of putting tapes over it, and you keep
mhm.
going on. So what we have to do is we have to slow down. Like that is the biggest thing I think all of us can do, is just slow
Yeah,
down and listen, have
right.
more quiet, do mindfulness, just like go inwards and kind of figure out what is happening to me. We're
Hmm.
all getting older. That's not going to change. But the point is it's not like a steep curve where you're just okay and then you're not okay, right? So
Right.
that's not just aging, that's lifestyle. That's the things that are breaking down within us. And so we want to start listening to those things and understanding that imbalance between the parasympathetic system, imbalance between our stressors, which can not only just be mindful stressors, but it's the preservatives in our food, it's bad water, it's sedentary lifestyle, it's poor sleep. All of these are stressors to our body. And we
Hmm.
have a whole bunch of things we can do, like yoga and meditation. And in this book, we also included things like fasting and
Hmm.
optimism. Like our mindset is so critical to how we heal. And those are things like with exercise, you're right up there with exercise. Things like how you think you're going to get through an illness, it will actually change the course of that illness. And there's data to show all of this. Being optimistic actually shows better health outcomes than not having the optimism. So
Right,
this is
right.
really important.
And I love how you talk about all of this stuff in your book. And like literally I just went like chapter by chapter, and I started marking pages, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I like want to mark every single page.
Yeah, I mean,
So it
you're
was really
hoping. Thank
well,
you.
yeah, it was really well explained. So I do want to dive a little bit more into the whole gut and mind connection. But before we do that, if anybody that's watching has any questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments, and then we'll see if we have time. We can answer them either live, or we can go back and answer them in the chat. But so Joe, I think that people, almost everybody like knows, is familiar with when they're feeling nervous or excited, and then they get the gurgling in the stomach or the butterflies, and they've experienced that before, where it may interrupt their digestion. But what I find really fascinating is actually the opposite, and how our gut microbiome health, can actually, if that is off, that can actually lead to symptoms of anxiety or depression. So let's actually first start with, I know we've already touched on it, but let's just explain in a very basic way, what does gut microbiome actually even mean?
So the microbiome of the gut is the compilation of all the genes that come from mostly the bacteria, but the viruses, parasites, fungus that reside within us. We have
Mm-hmm.
trillions, hundreds of trillions of them. And they're commensal, so they are working with us. We have 23,000 genes that we were born with as human beings, and our gut bugs give us 3 million. So we're
Wow.
literally 10% of our gut bugs. So if you can imagine, we have bad parasite or we have a
So
bad
we're only 10% human.
10% humans, we're mostly bugs. I know that freaks people out, but the issue is that these bugs are actually good for us, but they make our vitamins, which help our hormones. They make our vitamins, which help us make our neurotransmitters like dopamine and
Right.
make us think and clarity, And so there's this leaky brain, leaky gut concept. So if if your gut is not happy or healthy, and there's several layers and barriers to it, like there's a layer of this fortress, which is these cells that are tight together with these villi, which are finger-like projections. And this is our immune system. This is like our first line Marine Corps that is against the bad guys. So on top of this is a layer of the bugs that help keep us whole. And then the food starts to come, food, bad bugs, all these things start coming through. And these are our layers of protection. And if everything is solid, these bugs, they can't get in, or the food gets digested properly, it goes through the normal chains, and our immune system sitting right on the other side of that, and it is ready to pounce on something that looks odd or weird or is foreign. And so we want that immune system to stay calm, and we want this fortress to be strong. So we want those bugs to be whole. And how do you grow those bugs? We need parasites, we need fungus, we need all of these good things. There's a lot of good bugs that we need, like lactobacillus and bifidobacter, and these things grow by foods that have a lot of fiber. So whole foods with a lot of fiber is the key to keeping our gut microbiome. When we eat bad foods, processed, saturated fats, things like that, bad bugs can grow. So the war in our gut can start, simply speaking, with the food choices that we're making. So that fortress, this first layer is important. This tight junctions and these villi. So these villi can break down with, say, gluten, celiac issues. It can break down with toxins that are coming from the bad bugs. And it can also tend to separate. These tight junctions separate based on some food sensitivity. That's called intestinal permeability. And the foods start to go in between. The toxins from the bacteria start to go in between the cells, enter the bloodstream, and all of a sudden you have this leaky gut phenomenon, which then there's all this immune system activation, and you're feeling just gross. Like, you're just like, how does this happen? I feel like a truck hit me. I have rashes and joint pains. I'm gaining weight and my hair's falling out, and all sorts of things can happen, and all sorts of weird symptoms can happen. And so that complex can be communicating to the brain, because we have a gut brain connection that can actually signal the brain and make the brain unhappy through signaling molecules that are called short chain fatty acids. These are butyrate, acetate, propionate. They're generated by our gut bugs, and they try to keep signaling the brain, saying we're okay. And it turns out that just like you can get a leaky gut, you can get a leaky brain. And so brain, and so that anxiety that you feel, the nervousness, memory loss, that's all an itis of the brain. That's an inflammation of the brain. So part of it is trying to figure out, okay, what is going on? That's why I always start with the gut. So when you said, what does everybody start with? Most of the time, I'm starting with stool. I'm starting with poop. How do you poop? When do you poop? What's the color of the poop? We need to talk about getting the stool study. Sometimes we're doing breath tests and stool tests. Like I said, we're putting everybody on some sort of food plan to eliminate just the basic stuff, to get rid of the possibility that it's just bad foods doing it. But that's the starting point while we're gathering data and getting people to rest more, because a lot of cortisol, high anxiety, high stress, poor sleep can also alter that gut microbiome and affect our intestinal permeability. So that's where our lifestyle is so important, because the choices we make will directly affect that lining and directly affect that gut brain connection. So we want our body to be making, and those bugs make dopamine and serotonin and all of these signals that affect the way we think and the way we feel, right? So we have to keep that connection really whole. And fiber is the key. Fiber is really important. So up your fiber, and then some people say, I don't feel good when I up my fiber, and that's because the gut bugs are unhappy. And so you have to change those gut bugs slowly. And sometimes it's because you have a yeast overgrowth or a bacterial overgrowth. But there's a really good book, and I think I've mentioned his book to you, called Fiber Fueled.
Fiber Fueled.
It's really very, very powerful, because he has classes online that you can sign up for, that are like master classes for people that really talk about the role of fiber. He's a GI doc, and he deals with a lot of his GI illnesses, including IBD, with diet first. Diet and adding back fiber first before he does other stuff. And so it's very important, just like Dr. Agarwal, Monica Agarwal, she's a cardiologist. She's putting people on statins and aspirin and all that stuff, but absolutely talks about diet for a big chunk of that appointment, because it really is critical to getting that lining better. It's not just a Band-Aid. We have to heal the gut, and we have to heal that gut brain connection.
And that takes time. It takes time. And I think that that's one of the things which sometimes is hard for people, because they're so used to like just taking that pill. I mean, even when it comes to probiotics, sometimes we think, okay, well, I'll just take a couple of probiotics. But like how you've explained it to me in the past, like science hasn't even revealed all of the things that are in our bodies yet. So they haven't even been able to isolate them all. So that's why it's so important to start with the food. So just to share with everyone, my own personal experience with the whole, mind and gut connection was back when I was getting treatments for my UC. My doctor had warned me, okay, with this one particular therapy, we're going to be stirring up some of those bugs in your gut. Well, I literally started having panic attacks. And when I went back to him, I said, I don't know where these panic attacks are coming from. And then he explained it to me. It was because we stirred up those bugs. And so it was very real for me, like that this is actually, a thing. And it's just amazing to hear all the data and the science behind it.
Yeah.
So should we take a couple of questions? Sure. All right. So the first question is from Ushma. Can the gut be tied to orthopedic issues like spine and hip arthritis?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest triggers for inflammation in our bodies are sugar. Cane sugar is highly inflammatory. So can corn be for some people. So I always put anyone with arthritic type of symptoms on the elimination diet and get rid of the foods that are actually inflammatory. And you won't know it. I mean, there's blood tests out there and there's different tests you can do, but if you would just try it, because honestly, there's nothing as foolproof as just being off the stuff for 6 weeks and then reintroducing foods. So many patients have gotten better. It may not be gone, but it might be very significantly different by just eliminating those foods and stopping that inflammation pathway. We also know that when you eat matters. So fasting can dictate inflammation. So if you just change the timing of your food, and obviously I want you to check with your providers, because some people are on some meds that they can't skip breakfast and they have to eat regularly, or their insulin levels will drop, their sugar levels will drop. So I want you to make sure that you're okay with your physician to do it. But the timing of our meals also directly influence which bugs we have and how inflammation is stirred up. So inflammation, just know that inflammation, everything in your body that's like a pain, or even like I said, anxiety, it's an itis of something, an organ. So this is an inflammation within joint spaces, which we have now come to learn is not necessarily a weight bearing type of issue. So many people get their knees repaired. It's not necessarily weight bearing. It's the inflammation, which is in that joint space. So if you get rid of inflammation in your body, you can start to create some real change with the pain that you're feeling. So acupuncture, for example, energy medicine is really helpful. Getting rid of certain foods, eating different timing wise is very helpful. So Dr. What's his name? He's from the Cleveland Clinic. He has a book called When to Eat How. Basically, it's about not only what you eat, but it's about when you eat. And I will get this book to you. I might be saying the wrong name for it, but I have it. Let me just show it to you. It's great.
Okay. Great question, Ushma. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question because it ties in almost everything. So this is When to Eat How. It's a cookbook.
Oh, okay.
He's the one of the most prominent longevity researchers out there, and he does a lot of. He's 75 years old. He looks like he's 40, and he's planning to work till he's 125. So he has so much information in this book, but a lot of it is dictated by the fact that the bugs literally turn off inflammation genes. The bugs, our gut bugs, can turn it off. If we have a healthy compilation of bugs, we can turn off inflammation by changing those gut bugs favorably. And you can do that by what you eat, but also when you eat.
Wow. So when you talk about fasting, what is the time frame that you found? What is in your experience?
So I think most people can do minimum 12 hours, right? So last meal being 7 p.m., first meal at 7 a.m. But really
so that's 12 hours of not having anything but water.
Right. No calories.
No calories. So supplements okay within that 12 hours?
Typically are okay. Teas are okay, like herbal teas. Black coffee is okay. So things that have no calories. What that gets rid of for a lot of people have a snack right before they go to bed. And so if you don't have that snack and you do that 12 hours, most people can handle that 12 hours. But then slowly, if you start to incrementally increase that, whether you're doing it for 13 hours or 14 hours, if you do it slow enough, the goal for me is to get people between 14 and 16 hours of fasting. So your last meal's at 7, then you eat your next meal at between 10 and 12.
Okay.
So that to me has the most amount of data on humans to show change metabolically, whether it's like
Mm-hmm.
lowering your insulin, changing your hemoglobin A1C, changing your diabetic control, changing your lipids, changing your waist circumference. Many people, it's not necessarily weight loss, but because you're turning off inflammation, inflammation holds on to weight. So whether you have a
Mm.
gum abscess or whatever
Yeah.
is inflamed in your body, it'll hold on to your weight. So
Wow.
you want to turn off inflammation anywhere if you have anything that you're struggling with weight. So to me, weight is not calories in and calories out alone. It's also what toxins are in your system, how much inflammation's in your body, and if there's hormone imbalance. So we have to kind of look at all of those things too.
Yeah. Awesome. So we have another question from Divya, and she's asking, what are the important things to get checked in our routine blood work? For example, should cortisol, vitamins other than vitamin D, especially as we get older?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and I think we addressed it in one of our chapters in the book. And we have the
Mm-hmm.
routine blood work, like a lot of people get through their physicals, but metabolic markers are very important for aging. So, for example, what does that mean? That means waist circumference. So you should have, just to monitor that, because that change can incrementally just cause, inflammation. It's basically fat cells that are accumulating in the waist become their own endocrine organ and start to create inflammation and recruit more fat cells. So
Oh,
we want to
wow.
keep that. So waist circumference is a number that we really like. We also like, obviously blood pressure and heart rate and those kind of things. But blood sugar, fasting blood sugar is really important. I really like fasting insulin. Insulin is a very important marker because that number, even though remember those ranges are not optimal. So when you look at something like a fasting glucose, it says, 100 to 124 is normal. Well, the
Right.
ideal goal is 80. You should be 80.
Oh,
And so
okay.
if you see over the years with your physicals, it's going from 80 to 82 to 87 to 90 to 92. Yeah, you've been normal this whole time, but you're
Yeah.
trending. You're trending
Yeah.
upward, and that soon will turn into 124 if we did nothing different, right? So,
Right.
and then you say, oh my gosh, where did this come from? How come I'm a diabetic? And so, that was been creeping up over time. So fasting blood sugar, fasting insulin, an NMR panel, which is a specialized lipid panel that looks at not only the number, but the size of the particles is really important because you can
Mm-hmm.
have fluffy, light LDL particles, which tend to be bad cholesterol, or you can have ping pong size LDL particles, which are actually cause more plaque than the fluffy ones. And same thing with the HDL. HDLs are thought to be as good. Oh, you have a lot of good HDL, don't worry.
Yeah.
But we actually have good HDL and bad HDL. So we want to see the
Oh.
sizes of those. We also look at something like a TMAO marker, which certain labs do. TMAO is a marker in the blood that is generated by gut bacteria. So the presence of certain bugs will cause this TMAO level to go up because it increases your plaque production. So it turns out that in high animal diets, like with eggs and beef and also certain fish, those generate TM bugs that generate more TMAO, which can increase production of plaque in the arteries.
Mm.
So along with normal stuff like red and white cell count, I like a B12 level in most of my patients because a lot of us are B12 deficient because we need
Mm-hmm.
acid in our stomach. And as we get older, the acid levels fall, so we can't absorb B12. B12 is really important for lots of things in the body. I like to get a zinc level, a magnesium level, because
Mm-hmm.
they also do a lot of different things. Kidney, liver functions, urine analysis is important, but also these other markers. C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation, is something we get to. That looks at general body inflammation. It's not specific to anything, but it's the high sensitivity CRP, which is associated with cardiovascular health. So those are some of the ones that I would routinely get for a physical.
Nice. Thank you. And thanks, Div, for
Oh,
asking.
sorry. Two other things. Vitamin D, yes,
Mm-hmm.
very, very important. Absolutely. And cortisol, really, if you are someone who's very fatigued.
Oh, okay. Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Joe. So, wow, this has been awesome. So much information. And like, I could we can talk for hours and hours. And I think we have to do this again because, because we didn't even dive into energy medicine,
Oh, yeah.
which
Yeah.
is a whole other fascinating topic, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't hit on today?
No, I just want to leave with people that the role of the immune system is critical at this time, and everything comes back to the immune system, and we can really support our immune system with tons of lifestyle choices that we make every day. We have so much in our control. And I'm always, I'm not perfect. I also wind up not doing as much exercise sometimes, or not doing as much mindfulness, but just know that you don't have to be perfect. A little bit of something is better than nothing, but we have so much control over our lives. So please take advantage of your control and learn about them, and do some small stuff every day, and your immune system will be very thankful.
Yeah, that's great. And don't beat yourself up, right? If we all fall off the wagon every now and then.
Absolutely.
And we always, it just gives us an opportunity to get back on.
Just this conversation has reminded me how many things I'm not doing.
Me too. And I'm so glad you did not say, Nisha, stop the chocolate. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you, everybody who's watching live, and everybody who's going to be watching the recording. Joe, why don't you tell everybody, where they can find you, and if to get in touch with you.
Sure. We have a wellness center in Mount Airy, Maryland. It's called Shakthi Health and Wellness Center, and I have one in Elkridge. We have, our website also has a ton of resource information, podcasts, webinars, books that I've recommended just to educate people on where the resources are. I have Nisha's interview on there. Please check it out. It's one of the most watched ones on my website, because it's been so compelling to watch your journey, Nisha. So I applaud you. You're a great advocate for people. And so we also love, we see internal medicine, we see consultative medicine, whether it's hormones or fatigue or whatever it is. It's all, if you want to see a doctor for it, then we probably are doing it at Shakthi. So we are trying to incorporate things like energy medicine, Reiki, acupuncture. We have a sauna, we have a biomat. We talk about stress reduction, sleep promotion. So a lot of very, holistic, integrative things to try to get people well.
Love it. And it's beautiful. It's amazing. I love visiting there and seeing all the different therapies that you're incorporating. And I love how you're just constantly learning about new things. So many doctors you've achieved so much, and so many doctors will just stop there, but you're constantly adding new therapies and doing the research. And I love it.
We have a cookbook coming out next year. So that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.